I'm Maribel Lopez. I'm an industry analyst and founder of Lopez Research, and I'm the content chair for this year's MEnterprise. And anywhere you want to sit's great. So the idea, the theme of what we were trying to work on is where are we today in mobile, where could we go? And we wanted to try to provide as much practical experience and guidance as we could within these sessions. So to that note, we have an esteemed panel of people that are doing various things in mobility. And I thought we could actually kick off with everybody introducing themselves, what they do, and where they are in their mobile journey. And then from that, I'll ask some questions. I also know that some of the people in the audience have expressed the desire to have more interactivity and opportunity for Q&A. So I am going to go to the audience. So after we do introductions, I'll probably ask 1 or 2 questions, and then I'll actually go to the audience. So Spencer, will you have a mic for the Q&A? Spencer will be your man for the Q&A. So when I ask for questions, raise your hand, and Spencer will come and bring you the mic. And it's easier if you use the mic so that we can all hear you. So with that, without further ado, why don't we start with Isaac on the end and work our way back towards me. Tell us who you are, what company you work for. If it's not obvious what that company might do, let people know.
Yeah, so Isaac Sokolic, I'm the CIO at McGraw Hill Construction. You probably think of McGraw Hill, you think of publishing. McGraw Hill split off its publishing division about a year and a half ago. I work in McGraw Hill Financial, and actually my business provides data and analytics in the construction industry. We have a database of construction projects that we collect using proprietary methods, and a contractor or a manufacturer that puts anything in a building would buy either a subscription to that data or buy access to our market forecasting, our relationship building, our document analysis tools to get a better sense of where the market is going in construction. We also publish 2 magazines, one for architects and one for those working in the engineering news sector. And I think there's 2 parts to our mobility story. First is most of what we do in construction is build software that delivers our data, our content, and analytics to our customers. That could be as simple as a mobile site or a mobile presence for our magazine properties, or it could be a full-fledged workflow application for a small contractor who wants to get our data but wants to do it out in the field and be able to bid on a project while they're out in the field. So a wide range of spectrum of different types of applications that we do. If you track McGraw Hill Construction, again, the business that I'm the CIO of, is being divested by McGraw Hill. And so the other part of our mobility picture is with the divestiture, we are looking at rebuilding our entire back office. Our back office today is more or less provided by McGraw Hill. And so it's given us the opportunity to rethink what's our data center strategy. We're looking at 100% going to the cloud for that. And what's our mobility strategy, and we're looking at going 100% BYOD for that. So that's kind of the 2 sides of our mobility picture.
Excellent. Thanks, Isaac. Brian?
Hi, I'm Brian Katz. I work at Sanofi. I sell drugs. For those that don't know, Sanofi is a French pharmaceutical. For those of you who are from Boston, we bought Genzyme about 2 years ago, and we moved our research up to the Framingham Cambridge hub. And we also own Sanofi Pasteur, so if you've been vaccinated, chances are that came from us. And we also own Chatham and a few other companies, but we're 110,000 people in pretty much every country in the world. But we have a large concentration of people in France, Germany, and the US, our larger population centers. And I actually have a new title now. So I am head of end user experience and innovation. So one of the things that I like to talk about is user experience. You'll hear that probably today, and you can grab me at any other time. But in our mobility journey at Sanofi, we have over 50,000 devices deployed. It has been an interesting journey. We started with BlackBerry 10 years ago, a little more than that. And we are almost a wholly Koch company. So Koch is corporate owned, personally enabled. We provide almost all devices, which is especially important when you get to Europe, because between privacy and security law there, BYOD is much harder. It can be done, but it is difficult to do, and you need to pay attention to those sorts of things, especially with worker councils and the like. But we have mobile everywhere. Our sales force is mobile enabled. We have mobile in parts of our manufacturing, parts of our research, clinical, and the like. And we have published over 200 internal apps. We use a lot of public apps. And I guess a lot of the stuff that we're looking at is what we can do in the future. So we try and reset every year, and there are pieces of that, but we're also looking at everything from augmented reality, Google Glass, and the like, to things like NIME, Mio, the Apple Watch, and things that are coming like that, and how we can enable our users with that stuff.
Great, thank you. Mahesh?
Good morning, everyone. My name is Mahesh Balan. I work for a company called Schneider Electric. It's another French company. We have over 160,000 employees across every city and corner of the planet you can imagine. Basically what we do, we call ourselves a global energy specialist. So what that means is we manufacture every little possible thing you can imagine in an industrial scale, all the way up to software, and we are moving into cloud-based technologies now. So especially on the mobile journey, so I kind of come from a CTO perspective. So we do have our old CIO strategy, BOID, and all that. So I'm more leading a mobile platform and our app journey towards building consistent apps that our internal Schneider developers can build, which are about over 4,000 people internally. And we also have a lot of partners and vendors who are building apps on top of Schneider network. So my particular role is to create and evangelize a developer program to enable people cost-effectively build apps. So anything related to, I'd like to share that experience with you guys today.
Marty?
My name is Marty Resnick. I am the mobility strategist, and I like to say evangelist for Koch Business Solutions, which is the shared services organization for Koch Industries. It's kind of hard to say what we do because we have many different lines of businesses, from oil refinery to wood products to fabrics to electronics. So we own multiple businesses. We have about 100,000 employees, of which today 20,000 are mobilized, and we're looking to get that number up to about 50,000 over the next couple years. My role is to talk about mobility across the enterprise from a Koch perspective. So our main goal is to look at enterprise mobility holistically in putting together a mobility enablement strategy across the organization, from every line of business, from consumer to B2B, B2E, and starting to talk about the IoT as well. So whatever other acronym you would come up with.
I was going to say, we've had a lot of acronyms on stage already this morning, right? And many four-letter acronyms. So now I notice that there's a consistency between what Brian is talking about and what you're talking about in terms of thousands of employees, global employees. In the case of Brian, his company has purchased all the devices. What's happening with Koch in that case? Are you a large BYOD shop?
We have a good mixture. I would say primarily we're Koch, but we do have some businesses that are pushing BYOD. So right now we're probably about 60-70% Koch, the rest BYOD at this time.
Okay. So
and to be fair, we're actually about 90-95% Koch. We do have some BYOD, but we made a choice a while ago because we actually used to be personal liable, so we would actually, people could expense back their device and all that, and we did that back in 2009 after a major analyst house published that it made more sense for your users to buy your devices and all that. And we ran some simple numbers and discovered that that really wasn't true.
It wasn't me, just so you know.
It was not Maribel. But if you're doing BYOD solely to save money, you're doing it for the wrong reasons. You really are. Because if you're a large enough company, and we're quite large, what you can get from both the carriers for everything from pooled minutes to plans, including international, to how much devices cost, far outweighs that $200 subsidized device that your users are getting. And when it comes to, iPads were certainly a little more Cope-like because that is, in most cases, either not necessarily considered a laptop, but considered similar to that. So this is a device they're using. Its integral's a little bit different from the phone. But we do have people who do bring their own device. We set them up, but we pretty much give them email, calendar, and contacts on that, and not much else.
Okay, perfect. Isaac, question for you. So you're largely doing a external facing, not necessarily an employee facing strategy. Has that led you to an app strategy that's much more cloud oriented? Are you guys building your own apps?
Yeah, it's actually a mix. I mean, because we're a data provider, the first thing that's part of our strategy is make our data available in a set of formats that allows us to transform the delivery as the technology changes. So we've built APIs out, we built data feeds out from our content sources. We put search engines behind them. We've put BI tools that make it easy to pull images out and put them in different formats. We've trained people in HTML5 so that if there's something that we're not doing as a native application, we could still build an HTML5 interface. And then we kind of fit the bill of what we're doing in mobility based on where we think our users are. So for example, in our mobility, in our magazine sites, we'll partner with a company that will provide an experience similar to a Flipboard or a Zeit, because that, we can't replicate that experience ourselves, and they have all the expertise in how to handle content. So we'll partner, they'll provide a white label service, and that will go around our magazine sites. If the audience isn't mature enough using mobility for our content, we will put out a very thin, simple, underdeveloped app as a placeholder to start capturing that user base and understanding where they're coming from, who they are, and using that as a test bed to learn what their needs are going forward. So we deliberately put out an under-engineered app to start capturing the traffic and understanding what their real needs are. When we understand what their real needs are, and our best example of that is a small contractor who is trying to find out where their next set of projects are going to come from. That contractor is spending most of his or her day out in the field in their truck, very little time behind a device. They're very active on our sites to find the next set of projects, and they don't want to go back into the office to go and look stuff up or to bid on a project. So we've built deliberate workflow applications that deliver the content, that allow them to interact with it, and so most of their activity with our content is happening through mobility. So it's a mixed strategy depending on the need.
Yeah, that actually makes a lot of sense, because we've talked a lot in user experience about the desire in older enterprise apps is we spent a long time, a lot of effort. We were trying to build the perfect app. The dev cycles were extremely long. Frequently, we didn't get the right app, right? So we spent all that time and energy and didn't get the right app. So this whole concept of, I'll throw it out there, I'll see what people are actually using, I'll let them tell me what they need and then build, I think is actually a best practice in the mobile era. We've heard a lot about this concept of agility, and it seems like every month that goes by, that agileness seems to move up. It went from a year to 6 months to a quarter, and now people are talking like about monthly updates.
Yeah,
for things.
if people tell me the app sucks, I think that's okay. Now I can have a dialogue with them and say, what do you really want it to do? Because I didn't invest a lot in that version. There's not a lot of attention on it. Now tell me what you really need it to do now that you see what's wrong or what's not good enough. And we get a lot of good dialogue out of that.
That's great. That's great. Is that a similar process for anyone else? I know, Brian, you've spent a lot of time thinking about app experience and even have some terms around it that I won't mention on stage, but you might.
No, they're all good terms. No, I think it's interesting listening to Isaac, because I actually preach against that approach a lot of the time. But I think that when you own the data and you own the portal, you get a little more leeway to kind of do that sort of thing, because it's the only way someone can get access.
That's true.
And I love what Isaac was saying about APIs and freeing your data. I'm a big fan of, you need to open up your data so people can write apps to it. And the only way to do that is to actually build APIs and connections to your data sources and create something that people can write to. And then if they need to change the app, they're still writing to the same set of APIs. That's going to include identity and everything else. But we try to approach it from a different perspective, and we talk about the fun principle, focus on the user needs. And we get a lot of business requirements. And if you think back 7, 8 years, and some of you may still do this today, when you build a desktop or PC app, you get a set of business requirements, you give it to the developers, they start developing, they have a bunch of meetings, and invariably there's scope creep. Can you add this one more thing? Can you do this? And that really doesn't work in the mobile world. They need focused apps that they can get what they need when and where they need it. And so we talk about the ride-along concept. Get out there with your users, especially with your employees, figure out what they want, what they need to do. The example I use is Microsoft Word. Microsoft Word has something over 400 functions if you're just on the desktop. If you get the Microsoft Word app, which Microsoft has now published for iOS, it has a lot less. Yeah. And that's because most people don't need those functions. But yes, you do need to be able to take feedback. You need to establish those loops. Our goal usually internally is not to fail fast, but to fail smartly. So if we find an issue, we talk to our users, we have the same feedback, but our goal is actually to get closer to what they want on the first try, as opposed to not talking to the users. And by the way, it's interesting that sometimes your business itself, although they think they know their users, doesn't spend a lot of time talking to them. And developers aren't designed for end user experience. There may be some who focus in it, but I'll tell you, my new role was announced a week and a half ago at Sanofi, and my boss wasn't expecting the deluge of calls that we've gotten of, wait a second, you guys have somebody for end user experience that we can start looking at, because they don't know how to approach it.
I think that the two of you in a lot of ways are saying the same thing. So I think Isaac's perspective is don't over-engineer it. Put something out there that is specifically focused. It's under-engineered because he doesn't want to engineer it incorrectly, right? And you're saying make sure that you started with a use case right out of the gate that people care about, that people want, because why would you use the app if not? And try to get as close to the right use case at the outset, which I think that makes a lot of sense. And the whole ride-along concept, I think at the last M6 that we were at, I think it was Neil from Coca-Cola was talking about this concept on stage as well of building something and then really being with the users and figuring out what their process is and needing to reconstruct apps as a result of that. So that makes a lot of sense. I'm going to go to Mahesh now, because Mahesh, you've got a really interesting role, right? It's a CTO role, an evangelist role, trying to make sure that people don't reinvent the wheel each time that they're building something, because that actually happens, particularly in big organizations, right? Each group is doing their own thing, and it's a goat rodeo. You got to kind of get them all together at some point and see what you can do. That's my new term now, goat rodeo. So I heard that a few days ago, and I just love it. It's great. Tell us about what you're doing at Schneider to try to eliminate some of that and how you've approached the problem.
Yeah, sure. So our fundamental goal was to make sure the developed apps are consistent across the board and people are thinking about building a reusability, those kind of concepts. And first, when we started, we were surprising to see that. We were thinking nobody's building apps in Schneider. Who could be building apps? And we saw 2013 January, there were 65 apps released in App Store. And early this year, we were like 120 apps, and now we are over 200 apps in app stores. So, and both by across our Schneider employees or our partners, vendors, everyone. So we, as a CTO organization who looked at it as a global problem, so we wanted to come up with a standardized way so we can provide a framework so that we can't stop developers from what they're doing, but rather than saying one size fits all. So we took the approach of saying few size fits most. So what we are offering is kind of covering 85% of your use cases. So we standardized some kind of a mobile middleware to start off with and started evangelizing a concept called decoupling your business logic from your mobile app user experience. So we were taking the approach of saying your APIs are good and your enterprise APIs were not really created for mobile consumption right out of the box. So leave them where they are. So decouple the APIs and use a mobile middleware so that you can rapidly prototype against the mobile middleware. At the same time, your API can have their own evolution. So then on top of that, we are taking an approach totally hybrid-based, cross-platform development using PhoneGap and other modern JavaScript way of building on it. And we're totally taking a plug-and-play approach. So Schneider internally loves building a hardware bricks. So everything we build must work like some other products as well. So we're kind of taking that approach in the software, build everything in a plug-in architecture so that a team in China building a plugin will work against a team who's fundamentally building from France or India. So that kind of simulated a lot of interest in people learning mobileness, and they're not completely feeling like locked down into one environment. We kind of give them a Schneider SDK, what we call a Schneider hybrid SDK, that will help them learn on the go and start building apps on top of that.
So I'm going to ask Marty, you have a very similar kind of structure in terms of lots of organizations. Are you doing something similar to what Schneider's doing in terms of creating a platform that different groups can leverage, or what's your approach to trying to make sure that people across the organization are on a similar path?
So that's what we're working on. That's the direction we're working on. So we have many different organizations, and some organizations didn't even know that they had mobile apps in the App Store. We had to show that to them because they're being done by one specific line of business or VP of marketing or something that just threw out an app in the App Store, and finally IT got called in to kind of fix the problems that maybe that came up. So what we said was, or the direction we're going is, we don't care who does the app development, and we don't care what front-end technology they build it in. We don't care if it's hybrid, native, whatever else. What we do care about is we want to have some reusability, we want to have some lessons learned, and we want to have some controls so that we can enable these developers to throw out apps in the App Store or internally or B2B or however you want to do it, but do it through some sort of, and it's a bad word, standardized way, right, through that mobile middleware. And so through the APIs, through the mobile middleware, through our federated solutions, those types of things, if we can offer those across Koch, that's something that we can share across the organization so that we can help and enable IT. Because really our goal, our mobile strategy at Koch is for IT to be that first call. We don't want them to be the last call. So if somebody has an idea for mobility, if somebody wants to get something out in whatever app store it is, enterprise or public, that should go through, if possible, through IT, so we have some standardization there, some reusability, and we're not reinventing the wheel every time.
Perfect. So I know that there might be some questions in the audience, so are there any questions for the panel? I see George. He's raised his hand. Anyone else have questions, just so we know where to go next? All right, we'll start with George, and then we've got one over there.
So I have more than one question, but they're all related. And it's,
hey, that's an analyst move there. You can't ask 3 questions.
It's for all the panelists. And the question is, for your respective companies, do you do your development in-house or do you outsource it? I'm guessing it's probably a split, so I'm curious as to what that split is. And then also, what's your decision matrix when you go about deciding whether you're going to develop an app internally or if you're going to go to a third party for doing your development efforts?
So I can speak for Koch. So internally, we do mobile application development at KBS, at our shared services organization for those companies that don't have their own development in-house. So we'll start and see if we can do the development. If not, we'll broker to a vendor. So we have relationships with vendors to get that done. Some of the other Koch companies already have development capabilities or are working on them. So again, that goes back to, sure, if you guys want to build the application or if you've already got those relationships in place to build them, that's great. We just want to make sure that they're done consistently. So from a percentage standpoint, I really don't know. I would say it's heavily vendor right now.
I can talk about Schneider. So all of our CIO kind of BOID apps are built mostly internally. But CTO side of apps, like end-user facing apps, are widely varied. Teams who have skills, they go internal development, and most of the apps, cool ideas come from sales and marketing people, which don't have resources, in which case go with the vendor options as well. So we've seen both options.
We have both. As large as we are, sometimes when the business decides to do something, You don't find out till after it's developed for their brand. Again, we're pharmaceutical, so we put apps out there for specific brands, you know, Ambien, Allegra, the like, just like we put websites out. What we've been successful in, because we don't necessarily have a problem with it being developed outside of us, but again, it's following the standard look and feel when possible. But the other thing is, usually when those have to be updated, that's when IT gets called in. And we've shown them, interestingly enough, people who promise one thing. For example, we had an app that was going to be built for multiple OSs. And yeah, it's reusable and everything, and yet it was $70,000 per app. And we said, no, you're not really doing something reusable. You're charging us the same amount because it's the same data. You built it once. The second time, I expect you to charge me 15 grand. I get there's some development around, whether it's HTML5, whether it's for Windows Phone, Android, iOS, I don't care, but you shouldn't charge us the same amount for all three. That's highway robbery. And that really, IT has to become a partner with the business. And until you're there, you'll be all over the place.
And we're doing what I call a distributed agile practice. So we have on-site teams that are doing most of the planning and requirements analysis and architecture. We have partners offshore that are doing most of the development and testing. And so when I spoke about APIs and development of our core products, that's going through that agile delivery practice. For mobile, we've been doing something a little bit different because we've had different strategies depending on the type of product that we're building. We're more or less outsourcing the development of that particular application to a vendor that can do something specific with that delivery. Going into our future state, as we are looking to build more mobility into our applications, we will pick a platform to do it in, and then we will bring that into our distributed agile practice. That means there'll be specific people who learn that platform through our partners and managed by our employees to build applications out on it.
Okay, so just a clarification wrap up. If each person could say roughly what they think their number of mobile apps are and just a rough approximation of internal versus external built.
I'd say we're probably at about 25, 30 applications, and right now about 15, 20% are internal.
We have about 200 plus apps, so I would say 50% in-house and 50% external instead of mix.
We deploy to our users in our app store over 500 apps. About 275 are somehow internally built, which of that 275, it's probably, I'd say 50-50, but I think it's starting to skew much more towards internal because we have some great internal teams.
We're about 10 apps, but they're all customer-facing pieces, and they've been all outsourced for development.
Brilliant, thank you. And Spencer.
Yeah, I'd like to ask the panel something very prosaic and practical. What do you think is a good way to enable people to use their mobile devices more effectively? For example, providing a place to charge the mobile devices, for example, at work and also in this conference, for example, and stop walking barefoot. You know, it's a serious problem. It's the mobile conference. Yet, I would like to charge my devices. What do I do? So maybe you can provide some maybe practical insights so we stop walking barefoot. Thank you.
It's like the Samsung commercial, you have to be near a wall, right?
We'll all be clustered along the wall. Yeah, no, that's true.
Yeah, what I would say to that is, I mean, IT has a history of putting out lots of tools out into the organization, right? And we do a fairly poor job of educating users of how to best use them and what the practices around them. So you put Link out for the first time in your organization. It shows up as a nice new tool. Do you actually go out and educate users about what its capabilities are and what types of problems it can solve and what types of problems it can't solve and nurture its usage? We're not very good at that. And so when you get into mobile spaces, it's a little bit more complicated. There's more devices. There's more fragmentation in terms of what you're putting out there. And so when I talk about BYOD in my organization, there's a lot of responsibility that falls onto the user in keeping their device updated in following a reasonable procedure to do an iOS upgrade. And if it's a BYOD process, I'm not going to have somebody supporting that for them. They're going to have to learn how to do that on their own. But they're still going to call me up when they hit a problem. So we still have the effort to put in place to educate them what are some of the best practices to either maintain a device or use the device properly or pick the right applications to use, whether we're doing BYOD or doing something internal. And so you have to think that way, that the technologies are more capable, but also more fragmented. You have to educate users on it.
I actually think, you know, yesterday we kind of ended up with a discussion around security and security being part of the responsibility of the developer, right? So I think one of the things around battery life and optimization, we have to think when we're designing our applications and services, are they chatty? How can we make them so that they're better at battery use? But then also, how do we inform the users? If this is, if your battery is draining all the time, perhaps you should turn off this or turn on that. But I think really it kind of comes back to not having lazy code to begin with as one of them. And then we're all extremely optimistic that the Intel wireless power solutions that you can mount under conference rooms, desks, and the like will be much cheaper than they are today. So. Any other comments on that question?
Yeah, from a practical use, I would say involve your users. We have Genius bars at our major sites. So if you have a problem with the device, you can bring it there. But we actually have a charging hub by the Genius bar, so that, you know what, you're visiting or whatever else, you can actually plug your device in there. And there's that Genius bar is staffed 9 to 5 or 8 to 6, whatever it is. And so there's always somebody watching it if necessary, although they are company devices in most cases. But by the way, I do agree with you. I think that as part of your testing suite, battery life and network usage, et cetera, should be tested. But, you know, hitting on what Isaac said, if your users are involved in your policies, everything else, we did a fair yesterday. Literally, we brought in our accessory vendor, where we told people how they could order accessories, including battery chargers. The batteries you carry around for something like this. But we had Link there. We had a bunch of our internal services that we're driving people for. One of them was internal apps to help Sanofi people. So this was, obviously a North American one that was focused, but we got the users involved and we said, visit us. We had those types of fairs, and we're kind of trying to make sure that they get involved as soon as possible.
There's a question over here.
Hi. So you have a number of applications from 200 to 10 that are being deployed out there. Particularly for those that are being deployed internally, do you have any gauge or any metric around user adoption, user experience? Is that something that, ultimately I know you care about, but that you measure?
Our IT groups releases those apps using a proper MDM channel, and they have analytics behind running those. So I can't get the numbers, but the IT teams are really behind that to see how many apps are actively being used internally. That's been tracked.
What's one of the gaps we've found in our deployment mechanism today is we can't get real good numbers, for lack of a better term, real good numbers of what the users are doing. We can see who's downloading it. We can't see if they've opened it. We can't see what they're doing with it. So that's our next step. In fact, we're doing some POCs now around what types of analytics we can get and what we need to get in order to show value. And that's a real key piece to rolling out applications.
To hit on something that Mahesh said earlier, as you design these APIs and you come up with these standard plugins and all, there are companies, including companies here, I would guess, that deal with in-app analytics that will give you all of that. Your MDM can tell you how many times it's been opened, depending on who makes it, but they can. But when you start, you can actually get into analytics of how often it was open, how much it was used, what was, and they can still, privacy is something you can still keep, but you can actually get that sort of stuff, and that stuff's invaluable. If you're not doing that, one of the things that I talk about when we talk about end user experience is, unless it's something that's focused on a particular data source like Isaac has, There are 1.3 million apps in the Apple App Store. There are over 1 million apps in the Google Play Store. People can go out and get an app that does something similar. So you need to understand not only your user experience, but how your people are using it, and if they're using it.
Just to add on to that, on the app development side, now we're investigating the mobile A/B testing. Like in the web world, you used to test every single page, who's doing what, and do alternate path. So we are now trying in the area of mobile apps, which screen works much better. Then you devote the traffic based on who's on which screen. So then you get the app analytics on top of that as well.
Hey, two-part question. How do you scale your IT resources to support the growing user base across these applications? I mean, where do they go for help? And two, with all these applications, with the underlying platforms changing and OS is changing, how do you scale your IT resources to revalidate apps you've already got out there?
For internal app development, the respective groups take responsibility. We have an internal group, a collaboration networking group, so they take care of full responsibility of the apps that they are building it. We don't have a large center of excellence or center of experience kind of mobile-centric people yet, because it's a highly federated environment, and even the IT organization is kind of federated as well. So we have teams working, and internally they support the apps they are responsible for, and they have internal resources and partners with vendors as well to help support the cause.
We work backwards from the Gartner metrics on how much you're spending on improving the usability for your users. They have some good metrics on that. And so then it becomes an allocation exercise for us, right? If we think we need to support more on the mobility side, or if we need to spend more on the analytics side and providing more assistance or more training or more tools around it, we'll rebalance our efforts and rebalance our skill sets to hit those objectives. You have to look at it from the reverse side. What are you dropping off as well, right? So if you can't expand your footprint of employees or your expertise, there are other things that you need to be able to justify that, I'm going to spend more on mobility, I'm going to spend more on analytics, I'm going to spend a little bit less on Microsoft Office help desk. And the way we can justify that is just by looking at our tickets and seeing what people are asking us about and seeing what the trends are around that.
For us, it's governance. So we do some app governance. We have some best practices around that. I think it was Mahesh, but it may have been Marty that was talking about reusable pieces. So we've been talking about a definitive software library of, they call them plugins, but software pieces. If somebody needs a VPN, we don't want 50 different app teams to develop their own VPN solution. We'd rather have one solution for that. And if there's a problem with it, we update it once, they all fix it, plug it back in. And I'm using VPN, I'm not saying, by the way, I'm not a huge fan of VPN, but it's a great way to look at it because everybody's developed a solution based upon how do I plug into either Cisco Anywhere or whatever else and use this. And so by reusing those parts and actually getting people who maintain those parts, people can focus more on the experience and connecting to the data sources and giving those things. And then it's a feedback loop. You have to be responsive to that feedback loop. It's different that it used to be you develop an app and if you make a change a year or 2 years down the road, you're lucky. These days, if it's 6 to 12 weeks old and people aren't using it, you have to figure out why.
I think for us it was about taking a bet. So you had to take a bet and say, for these mobility applications, we're going to take a small segment of them. We're going to get some resources available for them. We're going to figure out the support and whatever else, and let's make a bet. Because where we lose the battle in mobility is on value and prioritization a lot of times. So in an organization our size, you can be talking about a new enterprise application, let's say it's SaaS, web-based, whatever it is, that's maybe $1 million play of value. Mobile applications usually aren't those because they're, in some cases, the micro app, in some cases they're larger. So a lot of times it's taking a long-term bet on mobility and making sure that those resources are assigned specifically to mobility and not getting involved in the regular queue, everyday life of other applications, because mobility will usually lose, at least at our company in that case.
Okay, so I have a question for Mahesh, and then my last question is going to be what advice everybody has for the audience as sort of a lightning round ending. So Mahesh, you've got a couple of interesting things going on. I wanted to ask you, one, how you're approaching innovation to get to these 200 apps, And then 2, maybe if you could have any color around what you're thinking about on IoT.
Okay. So when we started the mobile journey, we got the buy-in from senior management, and the second we figured it out, let's not have a war against the developers to adopt the platform. So one thing we did this May was a mobile hackathon. So we did a full-fledged 48-hour developer hackathon and invited people from internal Schneider developers across the world, people fluent from China, India, Germany, and domestic US from different line of businesses. We had 7 different teams. In the morning, we started the whole session, half a day, kind of fast-track training. So we offered them our platform and framework, SDK, kind of ramped them up in our learning curve. Then starting 2 p.m. on the day 1 till day 3, 2 p.m., they were put in a real 48-hour hackathon. People stayed in overnight in the company. We had food and regular what you see in a Techstar or Decorate-style hackathon. So they were really engaged. The interesting part was we had developer skill set who have no knowledge about CSS or HTML on day 1. And that's the team who won the hackathon at the end of day 3, because they tried to build the app for a real-world use case. So what we realized was at the end of the day, technologies could be learned, but if the app is really powerful and need to be successful, it needs to have a solid business use case associated with that. And developers really got excited because they had the ability to accomplish something, to go back to their businesses and showcased. And this kind of helped us selling the technology in a wide adoption within the company. So we're not going to convince somebody. We kind of put the tools in their hands and help them achieve what they have to do in the 2 days. So in addition to the mobile journey, what our larger group responsibility is called Global Digital Services. So touch base on what Maribel explained yesterday. It's about mobile, analytics, big data, and social. And we are in big time moving into the era of our what we call a Schneider Cloud for engaging our smart connectivity journey. So the stories are really true, about 50 billion devices in 2020. And Schneider already has billion devices that we know that we could get connected to. So we are slowly and fastly entering into that whole IoT world. A good example is we creating a next generation UPS that you can buy in Best Buy. I think before end of the year, you will have that. And that will have remote connectivity all the way to the cloud. And there's a big data analytics engine running behind those systems. So you'll be able to remotely monitor and measure your energy level on your UPS. So those are the kind of IoT era we are entering into, with mobile playing a very significant key role in that.
Perfect. Thank you. So 1 sentence advice for the audience, and then we have to wrap up and get on to our next panel. Isaac?
I would say, get in touch with your users. Put some quick applications out. Interview them, find out what they really need before and after. And when you put analytics out, make sure that your developers actually use them, because that's one of the best ways to see and learn how to change your application once it's deployed.
Brian?
Start your development with the 4 pillars: identity, security, focus on the user needs, and UX. Feed your business requirements in for real use cases, and you can develop some really great apps.
So from a CTO kind of perspective, we say stop reinventing the technology, start inventing the business. So that's the model we are evangelizing in the company.
I think for us, it's been about getting organized and getting prepared, so as an organization.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for your time, and I assume that you guys will be around through lunch if anybody wants to connect with you. So a round of applause for our panel.